Broadcasting live from the Capital OTB studios, this is Racing Across America with Seth Merrow.
We'd like to thank Woodbine for their sponsorship of this program and some of the other programming and events here at Capital OTB. Woodbine open now through December, featuring great racing, including the King's Plate coming up in August, Turf Champions Day with the Woodbine Mile in September, and much, much more. Woodbine Racing, great racing north of the border. Good morning and welcome to Racing Across America on this Saturday morning. I'm Seth Merrow. Thanks for joining us. A little bit later on, hey, we're just a week away from Breeders' Cup action. Monday, they will draw the official entries and we'll be able to officially go into PPs. They came out with the pre-entries earlier this week, so hopefully been diving into those and getting some ideas. But we'll talk a little Breeders' Cup a little bit later on with Mike Curry. He writes for America's Best Racing, and he's done some trends in some of the various races and a cheat sheet for the distaff. So we'll hit on at least the classic, the juvenile, and the distaff with Mike coming up a little bit later on. But also this weekend, that's next weekend, this weekend, closing day today at Keeneland after a fun fall meet down in the Lexington area. And who better to talk to than our friend Jeremy Plonk? We had him on first weekend and now closing weekend as well. Jeremy, good morning.
The starter and the closer. I like that.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Filling in both of the positions from the bullpen. I'm assuming you probably did your last preview last night, but people can find that on YouTube if they want to catch up with it this morning.
Yeah, the Keeneland look ahead we did last night. We previewed all 10 races for today's card. So that's on the Keeneland YouTube channel as well as Horseplayernow on YouTube. So be sure to check that out. Went through all three stakes races for today in some depth, and of course picks on the entire card.
Very good, and people can catch the picks also on the Keeneland website in printed form if they'd like to do that. It's been a fun meet. We'll get some general thoughts, but I wanted to start things out just kind of recapping on the human side. And the jockey side, no surprise. Irad Ortiz comes into today with a 7-win lead, so he's going to wrap it up. Tyler Gaffalione and brother Jose Ortiz are both right in the neck and neck for second. Tyler Gaffalione with 16, Jose Ortiz with 15, Luis Saez also with 15. But all of that said, and I have a picture on the screen, Irad's going to wind up with the title. But I'd be curious to see if there was a vote, because John Velasquez has had some kind of a meet. He's sitting down in the 5th spot with 12 wins, but 7 of those have been stakes. One of those was a $70 winner. One was a $50 winner. He has a couple of $20 winners, including the one yesterday in the Valley View. It's just been an incredible meet for John Velasquez overall. And as I said, be interested to see if there was a vote. You can't knock Irad. He's the leading rider with wins, but also leading money. But sitting a close second money is John Velasquez. But as I said, with half of the mounts, less than half of the mounts, just an incredible meet for John Velasquez.
Oh, unbelievable. He's tied Pat Day's record set in 1998 for most stakes wins in a Keeneland meet. He's got 3 live mounts in the 3 stakes today. A really good chance to break that all-time record. And, you know, for some of your fans who aren't our age or older, I mean, you don't remember Pat Day in his prime. I mean, he owned the Kentucky Colony unlike anybody in today's racing. There's not a jockey anywhere close in a particular meet as dominant as Pat Day was in Kentucky back then. So when you're breaking Pat Day records at Keeneland, I mean, that's like Bonds, that's like Willie Mays. I mean, that's getting up there into like some of the all-time kind of numbers when you just think about it. There's been no more prolific jockey in my lifetime, and I'm in my 50s, than Pat Day in Kentucky when he was in his prime. I mean, you could argue there are better jockeys, everything like that. But as far as dominance and just running with, like, there was no question he was winning the meet title. It was by how far he was winning it. And to break a Pat Day record, at least match it, and with a chance to break it with 3 shots on closing day, phenomenal. Phenomenal week. And remember, too, Johnny B went back to Aqueduct to ride the second Saturday of the meet, and then didn't get back for Sunday and took off that day as well. So he's missed 2 days of the meet, and who knows, you know, I mean, he just had a great run. And, you know, I mean, He's a year younger than me, I believe. I think he's 53, and he's riding like he's 33.
No, it's just been an amazing year for him overall, and Saratoga was great as well. But, being based in New York, I've had a chance to interview him over the years. Nice guy, great guy, kind of a representative of the jockeys via the Jockeys Guild, and he's done important work there as well. So it's just been fun to watch, to see him at this stage of the career, to have a meet like this. It's just been phenomenal. Again, he'll be fun to watch today. Also fun to watch today will be the trainers battle. Brendan Walsh and Steve Asmussen. Brendan Walsh having a really good meet, but they're tied with 11 wins coming into today. But Brad Cox is right there with 10. I will say coming into today, Brendan has 7 entrants, but there are a couple of overlap races, so he only has a shot at 5 without a dead heat. 5 wins. Steve Asmussen comes in with 3 entrants today, and Brad Cox with 5. He has one of those races as an overlap race. But that closing day is going to be fun to watch those guys battle it out for the trainers title.
Yeah, and in the spring meet this year, Brendan Walsh tied for the lead with Brad Cox. So we're kind of back to where we were in the spring. And so Walsh has really had a good 2025. I mean, there's no question about that. And, he's got a couple from Keeneland that will head out for the Breeders' Cup. And, Jin winning the Spinster Stakes, always a highlight of the Keeneland Fall meet is the Spinster. And to win that with a filly who wasn't necessarily expected to win it at 18-1, just kind of a sign of the meet that he's had. He's had a great meet. And Walsh's horses, I mean, you didn't always just go through the form and say, okay, who's in this race and circle Brendan Walsh at Keeneland. You respected him, but you didn't move him up. And boy, in 25, you've had to, if you go down and you see, well, Walsh is in here, you better you got to pick everything apart with a horse a horseman like that who's in the entries. When Brad Cox shows up in the entries, or Walsh. And the other one is Steve Asmussen, right? I mean, he's had okay Keeneland meets in the past, but really hasn't had a major emphasis on it. He broke a lot of mazes here with 2-year-olds in the past in the fall. It's that time of year for him. But this year has been exceptional for him. And, he's gone on quite a run the second half of the meet. First 2 weeks, you wouldn't have thought he was contending for any titles. But the last 2 weeks, Asmussen's runners are all firing.
I know you watched Remington, and how about Asmussen breaking through, what was it, last week and a half or so ago, 11,000 wins, the winningest trainer, and he did it with his kid out at Remington.
Yeah, and then so that was on Saturday night. Remington doesn't run Sunday. The first night back on Thursday, he won 5 on the card. So so he's on his way to 12,000, Noah.
That's incredible. All right, let's jump into some of the stuff. Oh, well, just before I do that, any other overall thoughts on the Keeneland meet so far this spring? I mean, I think it's been challenging. I'll put it that way. Certainly, if you had a good opinion, you got paid, but it has been a little bit challenging. Your thoughts on the Keeneland meet overall? Yeah,
I mean, look, favorites are at 30%. The national average is 38, so that's well below. And Keeneland's usually been generally above that. It's been fairly chalky in recent years, especially in the main track races. Average winner's been 6-1, and it should be around 9-2 as the set for everywhere. So that's, definitely it has been tough. There's no question about that. I think the 2-year-olds at Keeneland, probably the big story. Ted Noppy going to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, Schwarzenegger in the Juvenile Turf Sprint. Those are probably the 2 best chances that the Keeneland horses haven't winning a Breeders' Cup race. And then Further Ado has been the 2-year-old in the meet, to me, with that 20-length victory that he had for Brad Cox. And he's heading towards the Kentucky Jockey Club Stakes at Churchill coming up there after Thanksgiving. So that's, Dr. Kapoor, another nice winner for that one was Sappy Joseph one for Ken Ramsey, and he's headed to the Kentucky Jockey Club. So I think the 2-year-olds, this meet at Keeneland, are going to be the ones we're talking about down the line. Just like a couple of years ago, when the horse who ended up back in the Fayette here today, Hit Show, broke his maiden at Keeneland a couple of years ago. A couple of years ago, we saw Torpedo Anna break her maiden at Keeneland. So I think that's the kind of, even 2-3 years from now, that's what we'll remember about this particular meet. This is when so-and-so kind of launched their career.
Yeah, it's always fun. Spring and fall at Keeneland, if you're a horse racing fan, a couple of meets that we all look forward to, and it's lived up to it. And it's closing day. Let's take a look at some of the stakes action for this afternoon. We'll kick things off and go in chronological order. 6th race this afternoon is the Bowman Mill. $250,000 up for grabs for the 2-year-olds sprinting 3/4 of a mile. And I will ask, have you heard, I've heard Outfielder is out. They're going to head to the Breeders' Cup with Outfielder.
Yeah, and Breeders' Cup is cross-centered in both the turf sprint and the juvenile turf. So, juvenile turf sprint and the juvenile turf. So, yeah, outfielder definitely out.
Okay. So I had it 615. I had outfielder on top, but now I move up 615. A Gallivant is a little bit interesting to me, despite being a maiden with only one start. The number was pretty good. But again, I originally had this one underneath. I did pull up a replay, though, of Hartley winning the career debut effort for the aforementioned Wesley Ward, who has the scratched outfielder. So this becomes the other Ward. And Hartley, again, this is the maiden debut effort back on October 4th. Nice win for Hartley, the chart margin with just over 6 lengths. So pretty good performance. I think that one's playable. Spun DMC's interesting as well. How did you see the Bowman Mill?
Yeah, I went with Hartley in this particular spot. This course on the second day of the meet became the first wire-to-wire winner of the meet. That's been the big difference in this Keeneland meet than others, and why the prices have been a little bit different, because speed just isn't holding like it normally does at Keeneland. Opening day, there were no wire-to-wire winners on the main track, and then second day, no wire-to-wire winners on the main track until the very last race on the card, which is when Hartley did it. And so at Keeneland, when you go like 10 races in a row and nobody's won on the front end, that's like, okay, this track is not the way it normally is, and it's kind of stayed that way for most of the meets. There were 2 Wednesdays where speed did well, but otherwise it really hasn't been as dominant as we were used to seeing. So when Hartley drew off and kind of opened up in the stretch that day, that was a rather impressive move, and so that's why I kind of moved this horse up and think he's got a shot to come right back in stakes company. You get Johnny V, he's going for that 8 stakes win now. Wesley Ward's won this race twice. They've only run this Bowman Mill 4 years. So he won it with Long Neck Paula last year. He won it with Nakatomi the first year. So he's had some good horses come through here and win this thing. I think Hartley's in that kind of mix of a nice sprinter. And I took him, but I did take Gallivant second in here. Showed good speed in the debut. Local Knowledge was a good-looking Fletcher who won. And they won in a fast time. That time on that Saturday, the second day of the meet, that time was faster for sure than what we saw Hartley run, but Hartley was very, very visually impressive. So I'll come back with the 1 in here, but 1-6 is the way I've got it in the Bowman Mill.
Yeah, I don't have any argument. I had it flipped up 6-1-5, but I have no argument with Hartley. Certainly looking very good also in the debut effort. All right, let's go out to race number 8. That's going to be the Bryan Station. $600,000 up for grabs. Grade 3 event, 3-year-olds on the turf. Subdivision I like throughout the year. I talk about it a lot. Really, almost every venue seems to have, from January to December, some kind of nice 3-year-old stakes race on the turf. This one doesn't disappoint with an interesting field. And I went back and pulled up a replay of the Franklin Simpson back on September 6th at Kentucky Downs, and it will be a number 2 troubleshooting, getting it done. That one comes in off of this effort this afternoon. Tyler Gaffleone sticks on board. He was on board for this victory. I had that one down in second, though. I actually used Final Gambit on top. I thought that horse might be interesting, coming out of a closing effort to run 5th, but not a bad 5th at Kentucky Downs. Just was up against it, maybe with the trip that kind of come from out of the clouds. I thought Salami on the outside, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, for Chad was interesting. Simulate also could be a player for Belmont. Fun little race. The Bryan Station, what did you see?
Well, I looked down, and through the 12 entrants, there are 7 of them started by Not This Time, and you just say, wow, And
I hadn't noticed that. That's wild. Yeah.
Yeah, and the crazy thing about Not This Time, this meet, is he had 9 winners at the meet. 8 of them have been on the turf. It's just unbelievable, the run that he's had of turf winners. He had another one yesterday for Chad Brown. He had 7 through the first couple of weeks. Just an unreal run. I've never seen that. I've tracked every Keeneland race for the last 35 meets with the statistical analysis, and I've never seen anything like that with a particular sire at a meet like that, especially on the grass here, because you think about the limited number of grass races you get per day and per meet, and unreal. I mean, they're all flocking to the turf there and running exceptionally well. The only problem with this is you got to decide between 7 of them. It makes it a little tougher. There's 2 Not This Times in the last race on the card, so you can limit it down a little bit easier on that one. Give you a little hint in the last race on the card, Epic Horsepower and Royal Causeway, 2 that you definitely want to put in your pick 4, 6, 5s. going into that finale. But in this one where you've got to separate them, I'm with you. I went with Final Gambit. Look, we know this horse from the Derby Trail, winning the Jeff Ruby, but he's always been a horse to me that was going to be better shorter. I don't think he's like a long distance closer. He's a horse with a tremendous turn of foot. And those kind of horses do better in turf miles, where there's some pace about it and there's some urgency and they're not just all milking along on the front end. There's a good solid pace expected in this race, in the Bryan Station. He gets back to that mile, and instead of seeing, 6 furlongs and 111, 112 in his races, he's going to see a good solid pace in this race for the first time. And I think he's going to respond to it. Brad Cox's horses are run pretty good here, closing week as they typically do. Machado has not had a good meet, though. I'll say that. Percentage-wise, it's not been good. Issues of getting in traffic and trouble have not been good. I say that as a horse player with angst because I've been on him a couple times when that's happened, so you notice it even more. But we're going to need to get a trip with him, obviously, because he's going to be coming from the clouds. But it's a race that I think is going to set up for a closer, and I think he's the best finisher. I like the brisk late pace figures, and he's got some monster numbers. I think if he gets the right setup, he's going to come firing with a move. Hopefully it's good enough to get there. And Brad's really had a good meet on the turf. Like, you think about his, and it's kind of the same when you, look at the breeder stuff. Brad Cox doesn't have anything on the dirt, It's just like, what happened to all of his turf horses? I'm not sure. He's kind of dovetailed into a turf trainer here in 2025, it seems like, on the upper end. And certainly at this Keeneland meet, he's done more damage on the grass than he has on the dirt.
Yeah, I saw that maybe on Twitter that, dirt rate. Where's Brad Cox with the Dirt Breeders' Cup performance? But he's going to be okay on the turf. And I will just mention with this Bryan Station, because we talked about John Velasquez, he's going to be on board. Tenacious Leader in here for Todd Pletcher. Lightly raced, comes off a win earlier in the Keeneland meet. And I also mention it because at 12-1, why not on a Velasquez stakes runner?
No, I've got him right there in the mix. He's in my top 3. Final Gambit, Tenacious Leader. I think you definitely got to have both of those runners in the mix in here, and it's a competitive spot. So I don't think I don't think you want to take anybody in this particular race under 7-2-ish. I think it's a very competitive race.
Speaking of competitive, I have that written at the top of the page for race number 9, the Fayette Grade 3 event, $350,000, 9 furlongs the trip. Nice group of handicap performers in here, including some interesting 3-year-olds. And I pulled up a replay of one of those interesting 3-year-olds. I have the Oklahoma Derby over at Remington late September, and it will be Bracket Buster getting it done. I'll tell people also look at the second place finisher, number 2, Iron Dome, because he's going to be on the card today, that New York bred card at Belmont and Aqueduct. But the winner, Bracket Buster, I put this one on top off of this. And going against, kind of a salty competitive field, but has a couple of triple-digit buyers coming in. And I will say I was in the winner's circle after the Travers, where this horse ran second, a well-beaten second behind Sovereignty at 17-1. I can tell you the connections were thrilled. They were like it was a win, and I don't blame them to run a good second in the Travers behind Sovereignty. So they were thrilled, followed it up with that Oklahoma Derby win. But again, this is a fun field. You have Gosker in here, who's had a nice run in some of the big 3-year-old races this year. Rattle and Roll, I've kind of liked throughout the career for Ken McPeak. Honor Marie's in here, as you mentioned earlier, Hit Show. Again, this is a fun, competitive group. How did you see the Fayette?
Yeah, and look, anytime you get to Keeneland, it's like, okay, are they going to handle the track there, right? Because it's a unique track where there's, not that many races offered. Horses don't have big resumes there. So a lot of times you're wondering, okay, were they going to run as well at Keeneland as they do other places? It's kind of like a Keeneland All-Star game. Gosger and Bracket Buster ran 1-2 in the Lexington. Rattle and Roll won the Breeders' Maturity back when he was a 2-year-old here. Hit Show won the Fayette last year, broke his maiden here a couple seasons ago, now at age 5. So, there's a lot of horses in here that have already won big races at Keeneland, So there's some good matchups in this track, over this track. That'll be interesting. Gosger and Bracket Buster are the 3-year-olds in here. In the last 30 years, there's been 2 3-year-olds who beat older horses. There were Arch in 1998, who was really, really good, and Blame in 2009, who was really, really good. So you got to be a good 3-year-old to beat the older horses at Keeneland, typically in the fall. I think we've got two pretty good ones here in Bracket Buster and Gosger. Either one would be a huge surprise to be able to pull it off. I did pick them second and third in here, though. I think this race sets up for a late runner. And this race has been a race where a horse can come from off the pace a little bit, but you don't want to come from deep out of it. So even with some pace in here, at 1 1/8 at Keeneland, these races typically don't fall to just deadpan closers. But I think number 5, Moonlight, gets a good pace setup and has the best brisk late pace figures in the field. It's got a couple 105s, 100. And in a race at 1 1/8 at the end of the campaign for a lot of these horses, this is a horse who's, been off only 1 start since July, 2 starts since May. Freshman, there's won 3 of his last 4. You're getting a horse who's in good form. It's the right pace setup. And where this is an afterthought for some of the other horses who you may have been thinking, like, Hit Show was probably trying to get to the Breeders' Cup Classic, right? And he fell short of that. Gosger and Bracket Buster, they were involved in the 3-year-old races, and those were their goals. This might be a spot where Moonlight's actually the one who's supposed to be running in a race like the Fayette. You're in good form. It's the end of the season. Now it's time to take your shot. And he might be Mr. Right now, and he gets a good pace setup. So I ended up taking Moonlight in here, who I expect to get every bit of the 8-1 morning line. I actually think he might go a little higher, but the big buyer last time is probably going to suck some of that price away. And maybe we are looking at something in single digits, but there are a lot of big name horses in here who have to take some money.
Yeah, and I like that analysis. That's interesting because I looked at Moonlight, and I think you make a good point. Some of these could have, with their connections, opted to be headed out to try next week. But Moonlight is probably one who is a little more aimed right for this and right in the wheelhouse. But again, I think it is a fun, competitive field to wind up the stakes action for the fall meet at Keeneland. Jeremy, before I let you go, when I had you on a couple of weeks ago that start the meet, I was remiss and the time ran away, but I just wanted to give you a chance to remember a little bit your partner that you had the podcast with, Jeff Siegel. I did not have the good fortune to ever meet Jeff, but he was a prominent pundit and writer out on the West Coast. And again, I enjoy when you and he would team up for your podcast. I know you had one of your podcasts, you had some memories of Jeff. Steve Bick did a great show also, remembering Jeff Siegel. But just take a moment for people who are or aren't familiar to remember Jeff Siegel, who unfortunately passed away a few weeks ago.
Well, I didn't expect you to ask me that, and as soon as you did, like, the hair just stood up on my arms, and I just kind of like feel, emotion, because we were really good friends, and Jeff and I did 400 and some shows together, and the time on the shows, each show was probably each show was 44 or 45 minutes. That was the deal. We used to laugh about it because we had no format. And we would come on and do a show. I mean, we had like a loose format, like, okay, here are the 8 races we're going to talk about. But, we didn't know how long we were going to talk or whatever. And every time we hit end, it was within a minute.
That's wild.
Man, yeah, and we just like laugh. And he'd like try to guess what the time of the show was, because he's like, okay, 44:37 this week. It's just kind of like, we just had a connection. And, he's 21 years older than me, but he didn't feel like a senior father figure. He felt like, like an older brother, and just a really good guy. I mean, the shows would be 44, 45 minutes, but we talk a good solid half hour, 45 minutes before the show, not about the show, but like what was going on. And, I'd bring my dog up on the computer, and he'd be talking to my dog and everything like that. And then after the show, we definitely talk at least an hour every day, a couple times a week, about sports. He just absolutely loved UCLA sports and was involved out there as a booster, as someone who helped with the athletic department with doing some videos and stuff like that. If there's 3 places he wanted to be on a Saturday, it was Santa Anita, Pauley Pavilion, or the Rose Bowl, And if all 3 were going on at the same time, or 2 of the 3, he had a tough decision to make. But just a great guy, really sharp. The one thing, like, Jeff and I used to say is, like, I'd be like, hey, do we want to do a format, or do we want to, just wing it? And he's like, you can take me anywhere, and I can take you anywhere. I know you know the material, and I know it. And, like, the thing we had was both were prepared, and I knew he always did the work. There's nothing I could throw at him that was going to screw him up, and that's rare to have in a partner. Like, that that you're not rehearsing with like every single day and doing a show every day with. So we had a really great rapport in that respect, and just a great friend on top of it. He had been sick since late February, so we kept in touch a couple times a week as he felt well enough to text. But I got a call from him in August, which was the first time I actually heard his voice in several months, and he just wanted to talk, and he wanted to talk about the dog and how his sister brought his dog in to see him when he wasn't feeling well, and just it was really a good chance to talk to him one last time there in late August. And I know he's looking down and saying, shut up and get back to the racing because I don't want all this sappy stories about me. But one of the good ones. We lost one of the good ones. And last night I got word that KCG, the longtime radio engineer for Steve's show, passed away. Casey was part of our night school program. He did all the audio engineering and helped set up the guests and everything for that. So there are a lot of people who are playing the horse races now because of night school and because of the work that Casey helped us do. So, what a rough month in that term. But thanks for asking about Jeff because, keep him in our minds. Like I will say now, the podcast now, as long as I do the It's Official podcast, it'll be It's Official created by Jeff Siegel. His name will be on the show.
Nice. And I wanted to give you a chance. Like I say, I wanted to get to it last time, didn't, and I wanted to give you a chance because you guys had done the podcast, I know, for a long time. I appreciated it. And as I say, I never had a chance to meet him. I bounced around. I know a lot of the media folks on the East Coast bouncing around press box, Saratoga and Gulfstream and whatnot, but I never had a chance to meet him. But I certainly appreciated all of his work over the years. So I wanted to just have a chance to reflect. And you mentioned Casey, and I saw you tweet out yesterday. I did not realize he was tied into night school, but I have known Casey being a regular on the Big Show. I've talked to Casey over the years, and for folks who don't know, he was kind of the technical guy for Steve for a long time until he got sick, and he passed away too. So yeah, as you say, a rough few weeks, but just good to remember folks who made a little mark on the game. Jeremy, appreciate it. Good luck on closing day. Again, folks can catch the replay on YouTube of your preview show that you do the night before. The last one was last night. Your picks are on the Keeneland website. We will talk again.
All right. Take care. God bless.
Appreciate it. Jeremy Plonk, again, doing a great job throughout the Keeneland meet with picks on the website. And again, every night he was doing a preview over on YouTube as well. All right, as promised earlier, we'll take a break. We'll come back. Mike Curry from America's Best Racing. I'm going to take a look at some of the Breeders' Cup action coming up in just a week, so stay tuned.
You know the time is now. What you waiting for? The time is now. Hear us knocking at the door. The time is now. Do you want to give them more? Well, the time is now. You've seen the rest now. You want the best, but the time is now.
The 2025 Global Symposium on Racing. It's the premier networking event of the year. Connect with the who's who of racing. Collaborate face-to-face with key decision makers. Be a part of the international conversation. Discover the latest technology and innovation. Join us December 8th through 10th. Register at racingsymposium.com.
Welcome back to Racing Across America on this Saturday morning. A little Keeneland talk with Jeremy Plonk to start the show. And as I say, we're a week out, so why not some Breeders' Cup talk? And if you go over to America's Best Racing, the website, you will find plenty of Breeders' Cup conversation, including some trends and some cheat sheets and whatnot. Many of those written by our next guest, Mike Curry. Mike, good morning.
Good morning, Seth. Thanks so much for having me on.
Happy to have you on. And again, you've done some trend. I love trends. And I think historical trends are interesting to look at and can be productive on a, if you're looking at an allowance race on a Thursday at Keeneland or at Aqueduct, recent trends play in, like, the past month, going long, the 8, 9, and 10 hole haven't been productive, those guys. But big races like the Derby, the Breeders' Cup races, they're the same place on the calendar. The prep races are similar. And I think historical trends on those big races can definitely be worth taking a look at and be productive because of that factor that trainers get to plan. And so the trends, I think, become more important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it still comes down to, in the end, the shape of the race, which horses are entered, and, who's got the most talent. But for me, looking at these last 25 years of trends, it's just a really good exercise. It kind of gets me in the right place to handicap the races. And sometimes I think, too, it's a reminder of what's important to factor into each equation. And sometimes, too, the trends maybe bring it back to reality a little bit if I start to get too crazy with my upset picks. So, yeah, I mean, it's a piece. It's not everything. But it's something I enjoy doing, and I've done it for quite a few years for America's Best Racing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that analysis that you do your regular handicapping, but you come up with a trend that's playing into one of the horses you like. It can kind of pull that one out of the mix a little bit, perhaps. All right, let's take a look. Let's start with the Classic. You have an ABR article, 10 key historical trends to know before betting the Breeders' Cup Classic. And I'm going to start out with sophomore standouts. You have 8 3-year-olds have won the Breeders' Cup Classic since 2000. And I'm going to pull up a replay here of the Travers and Sovereignty. He's a monster at 1.25 miles. And, this was just another one of those races, as was the Belmont up at Saratoga earlier at the 1.25 miles and the Derby. And so Sovereignty just kind of stands out to me coming into the weekend. But talk a little bit about, again, the 3-year-old performances in the Breeders' Cup trend.
Yeah, and if you go back one more year, it's 9 of the last 26 were 3-year-olds. So it's definitely a race where 3-year-olds have excelled in recent years. And in terms of Sovereignty, he definitely, for me, fits the top profile in my estimation in terms of the trends. And it probably might also be the best horse, but I mean, he just has a string of top performances against elite competition. Comes out of a prep race in New York, won his last prep race, and I think the one thing that I find most interesting is just how consistently excellent these horses are. In the last 10 years, only Nick's Go had an unplaced finish after June and won the Breeders' Cup Classic. And that race actually came in June, and then he reeled off 3 straight wins. So when you're looking at, strings of victories together, Sovereignty, certainly fits the profile. And obviously he's in the hands of an elite trainer too. So that helps.
And then towards the end of the article, you're kind of then summing up things, and you mentioned Sovereignty, obviously. But then you talk a little bit about Nevada Beach, who I hadn't even really had on my radar necessarily, but a 3-year-old from Bob Baffert, very lately raced, comes out of a win in the Goodwood. I think if folks are looking for a price, and you would have to think in this field, Nevada Beach will be a price, that might be one to take an extra look at.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the fact that he has so little experience is definitely a little bit of a concern. But as you all know, Baffert is great in these races. And I just thought Nevada Beach's race in the Goodwood was pretty spectacular. So he's coming into the race in terrific form. Comes out of the Santa Anita prep race, which is a plus. And I think he's, for all intents and purposes, heading into the race about as good as you could hope for. I think you also have to look at Baeza too. I mean, another 3-year-old who is improving. You won't get as good of a price on Baeza as you would on Nevada Beach, but I think Baeza fits a profile in a lot of ways too, and he's just really good right now. And similar to what we were talking about with Sovereignty. I mean, John Sharps knows how to get a horse ready for a big race. I have a lot of confidence that he's going to be ready to go.
You also mentioned the coming out of various circuits and how productive New York has been. 13 winners in the last 25, and given that, Antiquarian is another horse that I think could be interesting, and I would guess a little bit of a price in there. Antiquarian, a close-up second behind Phileas Fogg in the Suburban, early in the Saratoga meet, and then a winner of the Jockey Club Gold Cup. So again, comes out of the New York circuit and might be a little bit, as they say, might get a little. It's Todd Pletcher, but I don't know whether that one is ranking up with some of the others as far as the buzz. So Antiquarian's a little bit interesting. And then you also mentioned the Goodwood has been productive as well, and we talked a little bit about that. But the trend that is interesting to me is the New York circuit with Antiquarian.
Yeah, I think in a normal year, Antiquarian might be the second or third or fourth choice in a classic. And this year, just because of the depth and quality of the field that we have for this year's edition, as you said, he might be overlooked. I mean, you've got a really good group of 3-year-olds, the top 3 returning from last year. I agree. I mean, it's a lot of 1s and 2s this year, all 1s and 2s this year, in terms of where he finished, and a really good Jockey Club Gold Cup, and probably a career best performance, and coming into the race in really good form. I agree. I think he's definitely a live long shot.
I'll also note, I like, given this, you have a category in here, classic style, and you sum up the paragraph there. It's worth giving a slight edge to speed horses, particularly out in, you're kind of saying when the Breeders' Cup's been out in Southern California. And I like the fact that Sovereignty has kind of changed up the style in the last few races to be up and a little closer to things. So that's may play a little more into him as opposed to when he was earlier coming from a little bit further out of it. But talk a little bit about the trend of being up close to the pace, particularly, again, when the Breeders' Cup's out in Southern California.
Yeah, so for this one, I eliminated the 2 races that were on all-weather surfaces and just basically looked specifically at the dirt races in California. And we definitely see more of a trend in these races where speed is a little bit more of a valuable asset. I mean, obviously last year, Sierra Leone came from the clouds to win, but I do think that was a particular case where the pace was just so fast. It was an absolutely perfect setup. So yeah, I think when I look at the race, especially the ones that are in California, I would prefer a horse that has a little bit of tactical speed at least. And like you said, Sovereignty seems to be learning as with experience and just getting better and better. And the fact that he can probably, sit mid-pack or maybe even a little bit closer and then make his move, I think makes him even more appealing, especially in a edition of the Classic out in California.
You start the article up towards the top of the article. You mentioned what I've been right in the same camp, and I think a lot of people are. I quote, "I'm as excited about this year's Breeders' Cup Classic as I have been about any non-Triple Crown race since." And then you go back to the 1989 Classic with Sunday Silence and Easy Goer. I agree. I think this is shaping up to be a classic to put it all together. And I'm really looking forward to it. We're a week out. Are you leaning in any direction?
I think it's tough to look past Sovereignty. I think the one thing I'm probably going to fade the older horses, specifically Fierceness and Sierra Leone. And I do like Forever Young. I think coming in from Japan, I think he's a talented 4-year-old, and I think he's got a chance. He's never run poorly. I mean, 9 wins and 3/3 and 12 starts. So I think he's going to run well. And then the other thing I mentioned earlier is that I do think that underneath I'm going to be using a lot of the 3-year-olds, Baeza, Nevada Beach, keeping an eye on journalism, see how he trains out there. But yeah, I think my main thing is I'll probably fade some of the older horses, Mind Frame, Sierra Leone, and Fierceness, and then try and focus on the 3-year-olds.
And I will also, we hit on Sierra Leone just a little bit, but one of your trends was it's tough to repeat. And not surprisingly in the Breeders' Cup Classic, but Sierra Leone clearly will be looking for the repeat potential.
Yeah, and I mean, as you know, it's only been Tiz now that's ever done it. So it's a heck of a task. And I, you know, like I said, I looked at last year's race. Just the pace was just so fast, and I don't think it's going to be by any stretch a slow pace this year. But I think that there's a chance that they're going to be going a little bit slower up front. Now, you know, I mean, there's a rabbit in the race, so that could change it a little bit. But I forget what the opening half mile was, right around 45 last year. I expect it to be a little bit slower this year.
Let's move on to the juvenile. And again, you've written about the trends for the juvenile on the America's Best Racing website. No surprise. One of the trends is these horses, the winners, tend to come out of an in-the-money finish. And you went back, and I was kind of surprised. You had double-digit horses coming out of in-the-money finishes in the juvenile. And there was one exception, and it was Fierceness, who had run seventh. But that was Fierceness. The consistency has always been a little bit of a problem for Fierceness, but he came back from a seventh-place finish and kind of beat the trend. But otherwise, they're in the mix. And this year's field is right in that ballpark. But Ted Naufy certainly comes in with a stellar record as well, 3 for 3, and undefeated kind of counts as well with the 2-year-olds.
Yeah, I mean, I think he looks tough, right? Fletcher and Baffert have a combined 10 wins in this race since 2002. I think Ted Naufy definitely fits the profile of a favorite. You know, fast, unbeaten, rising star. Breeders' Futurity has been a pretty good prep race for this with, I think, 4 winners. But at the same time, the double-digit long shots, there's been 10 of them in the last 25 editions, and I think that just kind of speaks to the volatility of 2-year-olds in general. These are all new challenges that they're facing. You know, how will they respond to shipping across the country, new surface, maybe a little bit more traffic or a poor start. And, I mean, a lot of things can happen in the early stages of a race to sort of change the shape of it. And I think we saw that last year in the juvenile and the East Avenue. You know, sort of the entire complexion of the race can change in the blink of an eye. And I guess the long shots just kind of, it's always a surprise to me because you go into these races and you feel like the juvenile form is pretty strong. But like I said, I think there's quite a bit of volatility, and it's worth giving a long look to some of the second and third place finishers coming out of these key stakes in New York and Santa Anita. And even maiden winners, you know, there was New Year's Day in action this day. And this year you've got Mr. AP. I think it's kind of interesting. He might be one to give a second look to. He's, in fact, probably my favorite long shot in this race. I think he's kind of interesting.
Yeah, Mr. AP, yeah. And you mentioned 40% of the Breeders' Cup juvenile winners prepped in a race in Southern California from 2000 to 2024. And you have a number of those also productive races, the Champagne and the Breeders' Futurity. Interestingly, the Champagne has not produced any starters this year, but you do have some horses coming out of the nice. I actually made my first visit. I was out for a family kind of thing in L.A. the weekend of the American Pharoah, so I made my first visit to Santa Anita, and I saw Intrepido. That was a nice performance. And coming out of the American Pharoah, he looks nice. And then you also have the winner of the Del Mar Futurity, the Bob Baffert undefeated Brandt is very interesting. So I wouldn't be surprised if, one of those Southern California runners, stakes winners, runs very well. But again, also productive is the Breeders' Futurity. And Ted Naufy so far, I had a chance to see him twice up at Saratoga. He was very impressive up there live, but watching the Breeders' Futurity just continued. I think Ted Naufy is going to be awful tough.
Yeah, I gave a long look to the Baffert horses, and I think he obviously has to be respected. He's got 6 wins in the race, and Brand is another one who looks like he has star potential. Last year was interesting. I mean, you look back on that race, and it's hard to believe the odds that Citizen Bull went off at. I mean, for him to go off at that price for Bob Baffert is almost inexplicable coming out of a Grade 1 win like that. I do think that, the other two Baffert runners, I guess I'd say I prefer Desert Gate. He seems to be a little bit of a better fit than Litmus Test. Comes out of a second place finish at Santa Anita to Intrepido, as you mentioned. I think he could be an interesting one. And then, Kenny McPeak knows he knows the path to an upset win. So Blackout Time was another one that I thought was a little bit of interest in terms of maybe some one to spice up the exotics at a big price. And it's just always an interesting race. And I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think Ted Knopf is going to be very difficult to beat here. But like I said, if something, any little bit of trouble or something peculiar happens, suddenly the race becomes wide open, and you could see another double-digit winner. It's just an interesting race always to me, the Juvenile.
Yeah, because as you said earlier, the lightly race, they can go either way. We still they haven't been completely defined yet. And I agree with you. Blackout Time is interesting because came out of the maiden breaker in the second career start and stepped right in against Ted Knopf and ran an okay second. So maybe benefits from that. It's, again, fun race with the juveniles. And finally, let's take a look at the distaff. Again, you wrote about the trends for the Classic and the Juvenile and some other races, too. People can go to America's Best Racing and check out all of those articles. But you did a cheat sheet, so to speak, for the distaff, just kind of giving stats and some thoughts on some of the runners in the Breeders' Cup distaff. And I pulled up a replay here of a horse I have liked throughout the career, and I'm still kicking kicking the luck of racing that last year up at Woodbine, I could not get the big price on Nitrogen, ran great, but just came up a little short in there. But I pulled up a replay of the Alabama, which Nitrogen wins, and kind of has validated this year what I thought of her last year. Subsequent to this, she was a close-up second to Jinjin in the Spinster. She comes in, again, in good form in a division that I think is a little bit up in the air. Obviously, Torpedo Anna now retired. But what are your thoughts on Nitrogen in the distaff?
Yeah, we're on the same page here. Nitrogen, probably my top selection this year. Racehorses that can compete at elite levels on multiple surfaces are just so rare. So I just think she's a serious talent. And I do think that she could be set up for a big race off that Spinster second. Like you said, the complexion of the race changed a lot with Torpedo Anna's retirement and then the defection of Cavalieri. I was a little bit surprised when looking at it on paper that it does seem like Seismic Beauty has a little bit of maybe a significant advantage in terms of speed figures. But at the same time, she only beat 5 horses in the Clement Hirsch and 4 in the Santa Margarita with an uncontested lead. So I don't know. I think I'd hate to take a short price on her. So I was trying to look a little bit further into this race and ended up with Nitrogen. And I do like Clico too. I think is a really nice filly who could has a shot to win. And then I do love a long shot in this race, and maybe this is just one of those ones where I've been on her all along and have never really been rewarded, and I don't want to jump off too soon. But Jugmont Homebred Skyla, I just feel like she has a world of ability and always has, and maybe just never found her ideal distance. But by tapping out of champion close hatches, she's run some fast races. And I think that she'll get a decent setup here. She's been pretty consistently good, just, hasn't really won the big one. But I do think Bill Mott will have her ready. So, but I'm with you. I think Nitrogen's probably my top pick, and then I think Skyla is my long shot here.
Yeah, Bill Mott trainee that I have liked throughout the career as well. I'm kind of shocked no wins on the resume this year, but has run well. Certainly was third in that Spinster. And I'll talk about one other one because you write, and I think you're right on when you wrote this in the article, Sarawik Rim, if I'm coming close to the pronunciation, is a true wild card. And I agree with that. Comes up from Argentina. very lightly raced, only 5 starts but 4 wins, including a Grade 1 or Group 1 down in Argentina. I typically take a wait-and-see approach with these South American runners because, again, she's 4 for 5 with a Grade 1 and $45,000 in earnings. So it's a different world down there. And as I say, I usually take a wait-and-see. But if I looked up at the board and saw, I don't know, 40 to 1 or something like that, I might put a few bucks on that one.
Yeah, or slot her in underneath in the exact or trifecta, maybe. I mean, just the thing about some of these races is you just have absolutely no idea the quality of the opposition she was facing. You know, you can go back and watch the replays, and they can run off the screen, but it might be, you know, claiming level competition.
Yeah.
You just really don't know. But yeah, she's interesting. It'd be fun to kind of track how she trains. And I saw there was an interview with Ignacio Correas earlier today about her. So very interesting, of course. I don't think she's going to take much of my money, though. Like you said, at 40 to 1, maybe underneath. Yeah, I could go for that. But I think it's a pretty good distaff. Not as good as it's been in years past, but in terms of a betting race, I think it's a fun race.
Yeah, always a fun couple of days, and highlighted by, as we kind of mentioned, the Classic, which I think is going to knock it out of the park as far as the potential a week from today. Looking forward to it. Mike, appreciate the visit. Again, I'll tell people to go to America's Best Racing. They can find the articles we kind of hit on today, plus many, many more. And as I say, we appreciate the visit. We'll talk again.
Sounds great. Thanks so much for having me. Hard to believe it's a week away.
Oh,
I guess 6 days for Future Stars Friday. Yeah. Thanks again.
Thanks. Thanks, Mike. Again, check out Mike's work on America's Best Racing. Coming up to the top of the hour, and I'm looking up. There isn't, again, a 12:10 post time Belmont at Aqueduct. And a couple weeks ago, I wound up the show early, expecting them to start the pregame early. But the last couple of weeks, the 12:10 post time, they've kicked off a little after 1, and they still haven't started, a little after 11, they still haven't started today. So we're good to go there. But I'll wrap up the show talking just briefly a little bit of New York, because it is one of the New York bred showcase days. So lots of New York bred stakes races. They're always fun. The highlight of the day will be the $250,000 Empire Classic. That's going to be race 10 today, Belmont at the Big A, mile and an eighth. And I just wanted to talk about that because it's going to be fun to see. I mentioned it earlier. We looked at the replay earlier of the Oklahoma Derby, concentrating on Bracket Buster, but running second was Iron Dome. Nice second when stepping into open company against some interesting 3-year-olds. But the race just before that was the Albany up at Saratoga, state-bred stakes race, and won that pretty convincingly. So stepping back into state-bred company, Iron Dome's very interesting. And we have a replay here of the Albany. Again, we saw earlier the Oklahoma Derby, but here is the race just prior to that, towards the end of August. Iron Dome getting it done pretty easily up at Saratoga. So stepping back in again. But I will say, this was against New York bred 3-year-olds. This will be against this will be against older New York breds. So it'll be a little bit of a different situation this afternoon. But I still think Iron Dome for Steve Asmussen is one of those good New York breds that may be able to move forward despite the little obstacle of facing older. That said, Bank Frenzy is in here too. And Bank Frenzy throughout the career has been a very good New York bred. 19 starts, 9 wins, 5 seconds for that one. Ran second in this race last year. So that'll be a fun race. Again, the 10th today, Belmont at Aqueduct, Iron Dome, Bank Frenzy, and a few others in there. We'll be looking at a lot of that when we come back this afternoon for OTB Live. Let me just hit you and excuse my leaning over, and I'm leaning over and I do not see my page of promos, but I do know there is a King of the Hill contest today. So keep that in mind. If you'd like to come down to the Clubhouse Racebook for some extra fun, King of the Hill contest this afternoon, Clubhouse Racebook, 711 Central Avenue in Albany. Otherwise, as I say, some nice racing. Keeneland's closing day. Belmont at Aqueduct. We'll have more action here on the network as we come back in a while for OTB Live. But I'm looking, and it looks like they are kicking off Talking Horses now, so I'll wrap it. But again, back in an hour and a half or so for OTB Live for a Saturday afternoon. Closing day at Keeneland should be fun. Nice New York bred stakes in New York. Looking forward to it. Hopefully you are too. We'll see you then.
Sometimes it pays to go with the flow, to check your worries at the door, to reconnect with your crew, to follow the thrills and the flavor, to roll with it.
With the wine steward, who we both have on top, Mike Maker, on a very good run.